Good afternoon. My name is Michael Wong, and I'm the co-chair of the China Working Group of Veterans for Peace, and I'm also on the Veterans for Peace National Board. I'm delighted today to introduce Judge Julie Tang as a speaker on today's Veterans for Peace China Working Group Speakers Forum. Julie is a retired judge of the San Francisco Superior Court. She's a co-founder of the Comfort Women Justice Coalition and Pivot to Peace, both San Francisco-based organizations. It has been almost 5 years since the October 2019 riots in Hong Kong. The Western media continues to talk about the riots as peaceful demonstrations for democracy, but the facts don't support that. Judge Julie Tang, you have visited Hong Kong since the riots, and it's a city where you were born. What is your take on it?
Thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to be on this prestigious Veterans for Peace Forum. In 2019 to 2020, Hong Kong suffered one of the most violent and destructive riots in its history. From the perspective of a majority of Hong Kong residents, the riots were a direct US interference in Hong Kong politics, and the aim was to create domestic dissension and prove to the world that China has failed in its one country, two system policy. People were really upset that during the thick of the riots, a group of leaders of the Hong Kong independent movement were shown in a video strategizing with a top diplomat from the US Embassy. The rhetoric and conduct of the demonstrators failed to make a legitimate case of democracy and freedom. They gave confusing and contradictory messages, shouting anti-China slogans and requesting foreign intervention. They were shouting, "Trump, please help us." And they also shouting to Great Britain to recolonize Hong Kong again. These are separatist behavior, not democratic pursuits. The Western media, however, recast the riots in the form of peaceful demonstrations and covered up the real purpose of these riots, which was understood by many to foment separatism and create regime changes in China.
What was the emphasis of the riots? What started it?
The lightning rod for the demonstration is the Fugitive Act that the Hong Kong government tried to enact. At issue is a young Hong Kong man by the name of Chen Tong-kai, who had gone to Taiwan with his pregnant girlfriend. He murdered her in Taiwan, then fled Taiwan and went back to Hong Kong. There he was arrested, pending extradition back to Taiwan to face murder charges. However, there was a problem. When Hong Kong returned back to China, Britain, its former colonizer, left out a very important law, an extradition law that would allow Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan to extradite and receive alleged criminals from each other to be prosecuted in the venue where the crime was committed. And without such a law, Hong Kong could not extradite Mr. Chen back to Taiwan where he would face trial. The rioters demonstrated against this law and claimed that this law would allow China to kidnap anyone from Hong Kong into the mainland China, where they alleged that they would not receive a fair trial. From a legal perspective, this is far-fetched. The Hong Kong extradition law replicates extradition laws in the United States and other Western countries. It would facilitate the administration of justice and fill a void left by the former British colonialists. As a result of the riots, the governor of Hong Kong gave up on trying to pass the Fugitive Act. Mr. Chen, who admitted to murdering his pregnant girlfriend, walked as a free man in Hong Kong, never having to face the court of law for the heinous crime allegedly committed. Now, oddly enough, during the riots, the loudest voice heard from the demonstrators, rioters, was not about the validity or actual application of this law, but to take down communist China, something echoed by the Western media. There was no rationality to their arguments. The fight on the ground was more about fighting communism and panning to the interest of the United States. And I would like to quote Nuri Vadachi, a respected Hong Kong Sri Lankan journalist, who said in his book, The Other Side of the Story, that it is clear that the invisible hand behind the riots was not fighting to save Hong Kong, but to destroy it. And we have to wonder, how do freedom and democracy factor into this vortex of destruction? How do the rioters justify their for freedom and democracy when all they were doing was destroying Hong Kong? They spoke with empty rhetorics, had no plans to rebuild Hong Kong after the melee, and they had nobody among them who had the ability to maintain Hong Kong's strong economic presence in the world. The only solution they seemed to come up with was to invite Britain to recolonize Hong Kong. This would be antithetical to the world vision of freedom from tyranny, fascism, and colonialism, and definitely antithetical to the whole concept of democracy.
How bad was the fight to destroy Hong Kong?
It was very, very bad. A sizable group of the demonstrators turned violent within a day of the demonstration. They killed a man who did not agree with them and set another man on fire and permanently disfigured him. They bullied and picked on people from the mainland China who could not speak the Hong Kong dialect, which is Cantonese. In one case, they hogtied a Chinese reporter from the mainland at the airport for hours, physically abusing him. This same reporter, who was in his 20s, committed suicide a year later after he returned to China, having suffered deep depression from the incident. They also ransacked Hong Kong's legislative chambers and vandalized the subway network on a daily basis to disrupt people from going to work and school. They trashed colleges and universities and turned the Polytechnical College of Hong Kong into a bomb-making factory. They threw petrol bombs, also known as Molotov cocktail, at police officers and bullied the police, family, and children. They used all sorts of weapons that would hurt or even kill people. They used bows and arrows, small missiles, and corrosive liquids against the police and people who disagreed with them. But their aim was to cripple Hong Kong's financial and economic system and to impoverish the city and its people, to show the world China has failed in the one country, two system governance. But they did not succeed, thanks largely to the Hong Kong police who was restrained. No one was killed on account of any of Hong Kong police doing. And eventually, the demonstration riots lost support from the populace, and Hong Kong beat back the riots. At no time did China intervene militarily, even though much of what the rioters were doing was to lure China into doing so. If China had intervened, they would declare the one country, two system had failed, and the only alternative would be separatism and independence for Hong Kong. But China maintained its patience, and it paid off. The one country, two system continued to be stabilizing Hong Kong and Hong Kong's self-governance.
What was the West's role in these riots?
The National Endowment for Democracy's website shows millions of US dollars were sent to Hong Kong groups before and during the riots. The people who participated in the riots later made admissions about how they were receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash from outside sources during the riots. And the money was distributed with the top leaders getting the big cuts and smaller amounts to the ones below, for example, to those who threw petrol bombs. And there were also many accounts of young people earning up to $40 US a day for wearing black and participating in the demonstration. There were videotapes showing the rioters opened up boxes of brand new helmets and had unlimited resources to buy weapons such as petrol bombs. Some were very professional in how to detonate tear gas bombs and repack them to throw back at the police. Well, they received training from the Western societies. The Oslo Freedom Forum had been training young people in Hong Kong to conduct demonstrations and used advanced technology to create a desirable effects from photographs and media such as videos to show that what was happening in the ground was peaceful and that the police were the bad guys. But of course, these were all just smoke screens and using advanced technology to achieve those purposes. There were also Serbian and Ukraine individuals leading demonstrations and riots. The Western media was uniformly biased in their reporting and did not report any of these things that I am now telling you.
After the riots, the US sanctioned Hong Kong for enacting its National Security Act. What's your assessment about that?
It's downright hypocrisy. Hong Kong's national security law was written to target exactly what the rioters were doing, promoting separatism, secession, and terrorism. This is something no country or state would tolerate. In the US, we pass national security laws almost daily during this Cold War climate. The National Security Act passed in Hong Kong in 2020 sets a guideline for Hong Kong against sedition, secession, and terrorism. Hong Kong's basic law, which is their mini constitution, specifically provides that a national security law be implemented. The main thrust of the national security law is to stop foreign intervention and ban foreign money from going into Hong Kong to influence its governance and to foment color revolutions and regime changes. However, the US and UK enacted heavy trade sanctions against Hong Kong and personal sanctions against the leadership of Hong Kong, simply because Hong Kong wanted to protect itself from foreign intervention. Ian Granville, a British barrister who was the director of public prosecution of Hong Kong from October 1997 to October 2009, said in a letter in February of this year, 2024, to UK Prime Minister Sunak. He said, "Everybody who loves Hong Kong breathed a sigh of relief with the passage of the national security law. And it was only those who wished Hong Kong ill who had anything to fear from the national security law." I think he's wrapped it up what the security law meant for Hong Kong people.
Peace is precious and we need to work on it. But we live in America, in a warmongering country. We created misery and suffering. We've waged wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Ukraine, and now Gaza, and other places around the world. Our political leaders are now openly talking about China as an existential threat and our next war target. But this is insane. China's never threatened us. China is also a nuclear power, and an all-out war between us and China would destroy the planet. Yet our mainstream media and our Washington politicians continue to cast China as an enemy in order to manufacture consent to war with China. Peace is precious. Let me ask you one last question. How safe is Hong Kong from foreign interference in the future?
I think as long as the United States is engaging in a Cold War with China, Hong Kong is not safe, even with the national security law. Our US politicians continue to attack Hong Kong for its alleged lack of freedom at every turn and make up lies about how Hong Kong people are being oppressed. Oddly, in 2019, when the riots ensued, the Fraser Institute, which is a respectable institute that does ratings of countries in the world and determine what level of quality of life that they were having, rated Hong Kong #1 among 163 countries in the World Economic Freedom, and number 3 after New Zealand and Switzerland for comprehensive freedom. When I visited Hong Kong in October 2023, Hong Kong has been restored back to a peaceful city. But I got the sense that people are cautiously optimistic given the horrific experiences thrusted upon them in 2019 and the violence that shook up the entire city. And even those who stood on the fence before the riots would not want those anti-China movement leaders doing their thing again to Hong Kong. Hong Kong people are practical and resilient. And I took it kind of personal about what happened in Hong Kong because I was born and raised there. And I came to this country as a teenager. I know that Hong Kong has a very good government that cares for its people and provides a quality of life for them. And the people in Hong Kong believe that this is a better democracy than one heavily reliant on elections. They also knew that Hong Kong demonstration riots benefited another country's agenda, not theirs. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of effort by the West to subvert Hong Kong. Hong Kong could easily become a pawn again in the US-China Cold War. But Hong Kong folks are learning to be vigilant and not let 2019 repeat itself. You see, Hong Kong people knew there is much to lose when Hong Kong succumbs to outside political interferences. Hong Kong is one of the safest and richest cities in the world, and it has one of the most respected police forces in all of Asia and possibly the world. It has a population of 7 million people and a GDP of 369.2 billion US dollars. And the GDP per capita is $49,800 US. And that puts it as the 8th richest city in Asia and ranks 6th in the world with the most billionaires. It is a very livable city with a low inflation rate of 1.88% in 2022, but not as low as China's 1.75%. Hong Kong, however, has many social problems. There's a great disparity between the rich and the poor, a lack of affordable housing, and a lack of coordinated education to overcome years of British colonial indoctrination. This phenomenon was especially prevalent during the riots, when the rioters bullied and picked on people from the mainland. It actually showed more of their inferiority in their self-concept after years of subjugation to British rule than the perception that they were better than the mainland Chinese. And as you said, Michael, peace is precious. And I hope Hong Kong people would strive to achieve peace and harmony among themselves and work closely with their mother country, China. And I hope also that our country, the US, would see the benefit of promoting peace and not war for its citizens and for the global community.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate this interview.
Thank you very much.
Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.